Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. Welcome to Eman Channel and welcome to Talk to Me. Here we are discussing, on Talk to Me every Wednesday, we discuss topics that are pertinent to the Muslim community and pertinent also to the wider community. And today is no different. Brothers and sisters, you can join the discussion as always by calling in on the studio line, which is 0203 515 0769. Now, you may be wondering, what is the topic of conversation for today's show? The topic, brothers and sisters, is single-parent households, and I suppose also kind of as an umbrella term and the things that come underneath it. So, for example, divorce, raising children in a single-parent household, and topics of that kind of nature. To join me on the discussion today, we have Brother Jamaal Richards. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. And our Brother Jamaal will go into it kind of a lot more, but has done some marriage counselling and stuff, and he's very experienced in marriage counselling himself. So it'll be very interesting to hear from the perspective of a counsellor. And we also have Sister Mesa, assalamu alaikum, who is a community worker. So, brothers and sisters, it will be a very, very interesting episode, inshallah. And let's get started with the discussion straight away. So, Jamaal, Sister Mesa, look, single-parent households, if we take it back a second, we kind of start by talking about divorce, right? And I suppose marriage and divorces. There has been a huge increase in divorce recently, and the Office of National Statistics has shown us that in, I believe it was 2017, there were over 101,000 divorces in the UK, in England and Wales. And even though this was shown as a slight decrease than the year before, that's still a huge number, is it not? Yeah,
absolutely it is. Sister Mesa, you was mentioning something earlier on as well about those are the stats that are being recorded, but you know, obviously we're saying that it's actually bigger than that because the ones that are not recorded.
Because the majority of Muslims don't really get married legally, so they have Islamic papers, and so this doesn't show up in the statistics. So unfortunately, there's actually a rise in divorce in the Muslim community, especially in the UK.
Subhanallah. And Jamaal, kind of, you know, you've been doing marriage counselling for years now. Have you yourself seen an increase in your sessions? And I know all of them are private sessions, but have you seen an increase generally of the topic of divorce or discussing divorce come up more so in recent years?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the rate it's always been high anyway. Okay. But it just seems to it's increasing, and for different reasons, and sometimes like even new reasons are being introduced now as to why marriages are not lasting. So it's quite sad actually. And just to correct you as well, bro, because I'm not actually an active counsellor now. I don't actually have sessions. Okay. But it's just in the years of having my marriage service and stuff like that. Then obviously I've had to do it a few times, and I've learned so much as well, subhanAllah, because you know obviously we're just human, right? Yep. So what happens is you'll always find that most of the cases are the same. They're so similar that, you know, you help one person and it just goes right across the board. It's about everyone's understanding of what they're supposed to do in that marriage and what their, you know, expectations maybe should be. So it's interesting. Well,
let's kind of talk about that. We're talking about here about kind of the expectations of a marriage. And Sister, you were mentioning that the divorce rates have increased I suppose drastically in the Muslim community. Can we put our finger on why? Is there a pattern as to why divorce is increasing in the Muslim community?
I think it's because it's really easy.
Okay.
You just have to pronounce talaq, and I mean I think also social media doesn't really help, where a lot of married couples, especially young people, compare themselves to people on the internet, you know, and they say comparison is the thief of joy. Also, I think unrealistic expectations, where young brothers, even older brothers, have unrealistic expectations of the sisters, and the sisters have unrealistic expectations on the brothers. And I think also this notion of there's plenty of fish in the sea doesn't really help. So brothers, a lot of times we find, unfortunately, in our community, before the brothers actually even divorce, he's already got 2 or 3 sisters lined up. So because marriage has become so easy, you know, with websites and marriage sites, you know, marriages become so easy that people are quite confident to throw away the actual marriage that they're in.
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading a quote that really hit me once, and it said that it was a quote from an elderly lady from probably 2 generations above me, so like it would be like my grandma's generation. And what she had said is, I lived in a generation where when something was broken, we would fix it, not throw it away. And that what she is seeing kind of as she's grown older is that we're kind of more likely to throw things away as a metaphor rather than try and fix it.
Yeah, of course, but there is, you know, it's common, but sometimes it's based on sometimes demographic, sometimes it's based on age as well. So, you know, you might find that there might be, for example, you know, people might argue that reverts divorce very easily because of the mentality they have about how easy it is, as you mentioned before, easy in, easy out. But then obviously there are other factors as well. So someone who's maybe from a family of, you know, their history goes back quite a way back, but even then, maybe as you said as well, you know, social media, the expectations change, and then it does create a lot of problems.
See, one thing that I think I would probably like to chime in on is that I myself have noticed that I think the younger generation has perhaps increased in like showing affection to spouses, or like it not being seen as weird to show affection, for example, to your wife inside the household. So as we know, it is recommended that we should we shouldn't make our children, for example, feel that that marriages don't happen, and oh, that's your mum and this is me, we're kind of completely separated. But if you see the generation above me, what I've noticed, and again it's just on my pure observations, is that affection wasn't shown. It was something that was hidden, even kind of in the household. It was just a small part, like holding someone's hand, like holding your wife's hand, and stuff like that. Whereas I feel like it's kind of promoted now, and so I'm trying to counter the argument of, for example, divorce being easy. I would kind of argue that it's easier to show affection because it's not seen as like weird anymore. Do you understand the point I'm trying to throw out?
Yeah, I do. I guess. Yeah, think about, for example, the older generation, my generation, not older, for example, and you might get a really nice, stable situation within a household. You got the mother and the father, and the way they show their affection might be in different ways. So maybe they won't be, sitting very close, watching TV together or whatever, but just their interaction, it makes that child grow up with that sense of security. That they would want to, continue, adopt it and continue. But in terms of that type of affection that you've mentioned, that is an interesting observation. Obviously, what would the reasons be? I don't know. Maybe it's just
perhaps it's a cultural thing.
Well, maybe not. Maybe it's outside of the culture. Maybe it's adopting maybe other cultures or something like that. I don't know. It all depends on how you mean with that affection. Maybe as you mentioned before, things like flowers and chocolates and stuff like that. But this is really nice. Obviously, people understand now that this is what really works within marriages.
I think also it's about pressure. I think the modern Muslim person faces a lot of pressure that maybe the older generation didn't, which is to look good, to have a lot of money, to have a nice car, to be a mother or to be a caregiver, i.e. the father. And I think a lot of young people break under the pressure, whereas before it wasn't so much. You didn't have to look like a glamour model and still be a housewife, and now a lot of your sisters have to go out to work. So it's a lot, I think, being in the West and being a Muslim mother or a practicing brother has a lot of pressures that a lot of people buckle under, unfortunately.
We mentioned earlier the topic of kind of expectations. How important is it pre-marriage to kind of sit down with your future spouse and set out your expectations and say, look, this is what I am expecting, this is what I'm not expecting, this is what I can provide, this is what I can't provide, kind of thing, to perhaps iron those things out in advance?
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. I have got 4 daughters, and I always say to them, you have to make sure that the brother that you're going to marry is on the same page. So, whether it comes to education, whether it comes to working, whether you want to make hijrah, how strict he is, if he's really practicing, if he's moderate, you really need to be on the same page. And unfortunately, a lot of times, young people don't ask these questions. They just, ask. They think a lot about and focus on what the person looks like maybe, and that's it. They don't really ask the really, really important questions. Something as simple as how many children do you want could end up breaking a marriage. you know. And I think, and it's not just the young people. I think, you know, we had the rise of divorce is also people in their 30s and 40s, and you know, and that comes from, I think, maybe brothers or sisters get weaker in their deen. They're not practicing as much as they were before, and the couple are not on the same wavelength. Sometimes sister becomes weak, and from that they divorce. Sometimes the brother becomes weak. So, you know, different age groups, like the brother said, have different problems. So they're not all exactly the same. Young people, it's more to do with superficial things, and older people, it's more to do with deen. And hijrah is a big one, where people in their 30s, they're not coming together in terms of whether they want to stay in England or leave, these kind of things. So I think that it's not one answer fixes all.
A very interesting observation. Jazakallahu khair, sister, and Jazakallahu khair, Jamaal. Brothers and sisters, we'll be heading over to a break in a few seconds. But when we do come back, we're going to be discussing, you know, the idea of divorce being really easy, and perhaps us rushing into marriages. There's a bunch of things that we are really interested in talking about today, and especially the idea of raising children in a single parent household. Let's say, for example, you know, a divorce has happened for whatever reason. What is the best way to raise the children? What effect does it have on the children? And you know, how do you balance your time with the children, with both of the parents? Remember, you can join in on the discussion today. We are discussing divorce and single parent households and the effects on both men, women, parents, children, and everyone kind of involved. The number to call is 0203 515 0769. As you saw before the break, we are joined by Sister Mesa and by Brother Jamaal for this very, very important discussion. And Sister, we'll take it back to what we were kind of discussing just before the break, and the idea of preparing for marriage before actually the marriage itself, especially for young people. And you were mentioning something quite pertinent kind of during the break.
Yeah, I think that Britain should take a leap out of basically what happens in Indonesia, where they've made actually compulsory, where young people do a course, a marriage course. So in that course, they teach them how to be married, how to have patience. They do group sessions with them, questions and answers. And I think it's something that maybe, inshallah, the message should take in and do you know, so offer that course to the Muslim young people, because at the end of the day, a lot of young people end up in divorce simply because they don't have the tools to continue in the marriage, because marriage is a union of two people, two personalities, two opinions, two, you know, two human beings becoming one under one roof. And so it's a massive change, and a lot of young people can't cope with that, hence divorce.
Jamaal, do you think that this is something that should be made compulsory? Yeah. Could it be seen as slightly patronising, perhaps?
I don't think it's patronising at all. I think it's a very good idea, because the other thing that it addresses is the fact that in many cases in marriage, pre-marriage interviews, people tend to put on a facade, and you know, they will exaggerate about their character, and people also will maybe give an exaggerated testimony, not necessarily a false testimony, but an exaggerated one. So what happens is, within the process at the moment is it can be very quick. You know, for example, you sit down with the person for half an hour, and then in that time you can determine that, oh, you know, he's a really nice brother, mashallah. You know, but you haven't travelled with him, you haven't spent time with him, done business with him. So that marriage now, what happens is, the sister in that instance, she finds out in a very, you know, shocking way that this person that she's married is not the same person that, you know, she thought he was, and vice versa. It happens the other way around as well. So that's what that course would really help with that, because over a period of time, people tend to break down, you know, so they put a facade on, but then you start to, you know, etch away at that, and then you start to see the real person after a period of time. So I think it's a brilliant idea.
Jazakallahu khair, Jamaal. Brothers and sisters, we have a caller on the line, so we'll take that question, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, sister. What would you like to say to our panellists today?
I just wanted to say, it's great that a sister's come into the show today. Alhamdulillah, I was listening to her, and mashallah, she said about hijrah and how you have to have the same partner on the same page, otherwise you can't get along. It's going to be difficult. But I also wanted to mention that in the Western society that we all live in, we do have a lot of nafs as well, and desires, and if it's not been practiced and controlled, there's going to be a lot of fitna in your household, like the TV, the magazines, anything, even your mobile phone. Yeah, and young children, well, even young teenagers, what do they do? What do they get up to in the bedrooms? It's wrong. They're not like it's all that, see all that fitna and facade has been brainwashed in the brains, and they don't know how to behave, they don't know how to get out of it, but end of the day, it's all about just, it's helping them to get out of it, isn't it?
Sure.
I
Jazakallah
also
khair.
want to say,
Go ahead.
for myself, I find it very difficult to get a husband, because a lot of the times I feel like I'm a strong lady. I don't want to have a husband because I've been in my fitna times. I had a partner, but I never got on, and I just find it very difficult. And I actually look up to Maryam, and she never had a husband. Sometimes women don't really need a husband if you don't want one. But I also want to say, see, in the Western countries, when they say you're not allowed 4 wives, what's wrong with that? If a man wants it and he's going to treat them fairly, if it's going to keep the fitna and facade away and look after 4 women and have children and families, what's wrong with that? As long as the women are all right with it. Why does it not happen in this country more often?
Thank you for your comment, sister. Sister, I have a question. You were mentioning kind of about the idea of perhaps not wanting to get married, or sisters not wanting to get married. What do you think about the idea of that was kind of being proposed on the panel today? That we see in Malaysia and countries like Indonesia, where premarital training can take place, so that a man and woman can really get to know each other and understand what they're going into together, the union that they're going into together, before actually getting married. What do you think of that?
That's a great thing, because if it's Islamic, if it's allowed, what's wrong with it?
Sure.
It's better than doing it in the fitna way.
Sure.
It's a great thing, brother.
Sure.
Islamic anyway.
Jazakallah khair for calling, sister, and please do keep watching on your TV screens, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Sister Umaisa, so based on the comments that the sister was kind of mentioned, there was a few different comments there, but I think a big highlight was kind of the fitna that exists in our society, and it's only becoming more prevalent. Something that sounds like it's something important to kind of touch on, I suppose. Yeah,
I mean, in terms of regulating what your children watch or what your children don't watch, it's very, very difficult to police what the children are doing, what they're not doing, and a lot of the times parents get the blame for their children and how their children turn out. But at the end of the day, children have got they turn into adults, and they turn into adults with their own nafs, and all you can do is do the best that you can, because we have to remember that we're in the West, and so no matter how much you teach your child, the minute that they're outside, especially if they go to mainstream schools, the bulk of their time is in a mainstream school, so you're just getting the leftovers of the child when they come home tired. And so, the only advice I can give to parents is do the best you can, make dua, and everything else is in the hands of Allah. And you have to be realistic as well. I mean, taking the phones off them, taking the internet off them, and having no TVs in the house doesn't necessarily work, because what will then happen is that they will go elsewhere trying to find out and to use these instruments, and then end up maybe getting manipulated or groomed or used. So sometimes you have to pick your battles and take the lesser evil. I'm not saying just let them do what they want, but you have to be realistic. Maybe regulate how much internet they have, and regulate maybe if they're going to go on YouTube or whatever, they do it while they're in the bed, while they're in the room, or have their bedroom door open. That's the only advice, because I've got 4 daughters and I brought them up singly.
SubhanAllah, very, very good point, sister. And kind of just as a kind of segue off of that topic, one of the things that we wanted to discuss, Jamaal, today was the effects of divorce on both a wife and a husband. And so if we start with the effects on a wife, sister, you just mentioned yourself that you're a single parent. Kind of what are the kind of effects that we're looking at when a divorce takes place for the wife?
First of all, you lose your mahram. So you're then left to your own devices, and unfortunately what happens is a lot of times when the sister's practicing, she's so used to being taken and brought and looked after that she's ended up, it's like you get thrown into the deep end, because now you've got to do everything yourself, where your husband used to do everything for you. So that situation is very difficult, and also to come to terms with the fact that the man that you was married to now is your non-mahram. So you have to have a barrier there, and you know, even if he comes for the children, you have to speak to him from behind the door or limit your conversation. So that transition can be quite difficult. You have to sort of really control yourself and fear Allah in that situation. And also remarrying can be difficult if you can't let go of your ex-husband, or if your ex-husband can't let go of you, which is often more the situation when the sister does try to remarry, the ex-husband turns up and causes a big fitna, big problem. Yeah.
And Jamaal, just kind of continuing on from that, kind of the effect on the wife and the husband as well. I'd love to kind of be able to touch on both before we go over to our next break as well, inshallah.
Yeah, so obviously everything the sister said, alhamdulillah, you know, it's really, really, it's profound, because as you said, like, the effects can be, you know, we hear sisters, for example, saying that they haven't got married in 10, 15, 20 years, and sometimes they get greatly put off marriage, which is a real shame, subhanAllah.
After divorce?
After divorce, okay. Yeah. Depending on the circumstances of their divorce. You know, and even for some brothers as well, you know, maybe I don't know, their confidence might be knocked as well. They feel that they didn't, you know, produce the goods in terms of, you know, being a good quality husband, and you know, all of these sort of factors. But unfortunately, it seems to always be the sisters who end up worst off, because for the brothers it's kind of easy. Again, we mentioned about this whole facade thing, being able to just go out there and pretend to be something that you're not. So he may carry baggage in a different way to how she carries baggage. He may carry baggage in a way that he will go on pretending and just maybe having a string of divorces, whereas she will have baggage in a different way, where she will be put off marriage, and it'll take a lot to reassure her that it's okay. And then when she finally gets reassured that it's okay, some other, you know, I can't find a decent word to use for him, but, you know, some other brother turns up and, you know, just makes it even worse. So these are the kind of things that we have to...
And also the social stigma. I mean, like, if the sister's been divorced once and she remarries, she's then a lot of the times introduced her sister's been married twice, and if she gets married 3 times or 4 times, it's like there's something wrong with the sister. Whereas where it's brothers, they're prolific marrying, they're divorcing and marrying, and it's never even mentioned, and it's not a thing. So this is hence why women take much longer to remarry, because they have to try to make sure that this next person they marry, they stay with, which you can't determine, because that's in the qadr of Allah. So, you know, women get treated a bit differently to women in terms of divorce.
Yeah.
Jazakallahu khair. Brothers and sisters, after the break we'll be discussing the effects of divorce on the children in a household, and how the children can balance their time between the mother and the father, and how single parents can raise their children. And now we want to shift over to a discussion of children in the children who are, I suppose, involved in, for example, divorce. I know myself that I was raised, I suppose, in a single-parent household after the first kind of few years of my childhood, and I don't know if I was like one of the lucky ones, but I've been blessed to have a great relationship with both my mother and my father, even once they had separated, and I have good memories of that. You know, my dad made the effort to always come and take us to Jamaal and etc. But what are some of the effects that can, I suppose, on a psychological level take place for a child when their parents do separate? Jamaal?
I mean, that's such a vast question, because there's so many different ways that a child's going to be affected. For example, if it's a male child, if it's a boy, all the things that he would hear at school about his friends and what they did with their dad over the weekend and stuff like that, it makes them feel very bitter. And the way they grow as well, they grow very, very bitter as well, and the effects can be seen in many different ways. And, you know, for daughters, I mean, maybe Sister Ramesh will be able to, you know, elaborate even more, but I would imagine that she may have certain, well, it could happen, where she could resent men because of the fact that her father, depending on the circumstances, if he left and didn't even bother about his daughters, then she may not have a very good impression of him. But you of course, you know better.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just my daughters, but in the community that I come from, divorce is rife. And what often happens is that how when the parents first divorce, they then get into a tug of war with the children, and the children unfortunately get used as a pawn. So, you know, sometimes the father doesn't get to see the child, sometimes the father doesn't want to see the children as a punishment for the mother. Sometimes the mother, if the father's remarried, refuses to let him see the children, and so on and so forth. In terms of their psychological Affects, it is quite sad for the boys and the girls, because you know, your early years are your most informative years, and they're the years where you make a lot of your personality gets made. And so when children from broken homes see their parents fighting, in and amongst that there's a lot of lies, there's a lot of deceit. Mums tell their children to say things that are not happening to the father, and vice versa. The father says bad things about the mother says bad things about the father, and then you have the disappointment that the children have when the father stops coming around. You know, I can't count the amount of times my children have sat with their jackets waiting for their dads to come, and having to fall asleep on the settee. And that's, I would say 90% of children grow up with that. And in terms of how the females end up growing up, they end up growing up like really, really strong women, but maybe a little bit too independent, where they feel like they don't need a man, they don't need a husband. And when you're practicing, that kind of like doesn't go hand in hand with Islam, because they feel like, well, we've made it on our own, we've done everything on our own. So like I drive, my daughters drive, and so they've had to do everything on their own. And so sometimes that can end up being more of a hindrance in a relationship, because they don't value a man, or because they haven't had a man around, you know.
What kind of support systems does the community, or should the community, provide to children who come from broken homes, and or should they even should it you know, does it mean that kind of the parents should actually ensure that they put more of an effort because they know that they're now separated?
I think the best thing that the community can do is to hold, for example, if it's a father, you know, hold him accountable. He should have some sort of accountability so that it doesn't become an easy thing to neglect his children. But I can't think the community, I can't see other ways where it can actually help, because it's really about the person and instilling that sort of sense of responsibility in them. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. I mean, so for example, in the local masjid where we live, say Ladbroke Grove, for example, the brothers they congregate there and they pray together, and it's well known that the brothers are not looking after their children. So brothers from the community should speak up and say, "Akhi, subhanallah, you know, take your children, support your children, you know, give them money, take them out." And, you know, this is what Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi al Munkar is. You know, we are a community, we're one ummah. And in terms of physically helping, you know, if there's boys, take them swimming, take them camping. You know, like, alhamdulillah, I didn't have boys, but I know friends that had boys, and they used to hear from the community that for example, every Sunday there was swimming. The men used to take the boys to swimming, but certain boys never got to go because the mums can't take them. So this is something that the brothers should do, and same with the sisters. If there's a male single parent, there are not many, but there are. The sisters then, if he's got girls, take them Eid prayer with them. You know, do things. Sometimes there's women that have passed away, not always divorced. You know, look out for the girls, take them shopping, do things. We're a community, we're a ummah, but we don't have that. And just to wrap up, I think before, when the divorce does happen, I think more brothers and sisters should get involved in trying to get couples back together. And this is something that we've lost.
This kind of reminds me of an initiative that I spoke to one brother about recently. What he does is he holds like father-son retreats, because he found that in his community, at least, there was this kind of battle between fathers and sons and having a good, strong relationship with each other. And so he would hold retreats where it's just the fathers and sons, they go and they do camping and they do all of these kind of activities that help them build a stronger bond with each other. Because I suppose there can sometimes be a friction between fathers and sons. So seeing more of that for kind of all family members in different kind of ways sounds like something that would be really cool to kind of open up to in our society.
And obviously we also need to think about the effects, not just because of the act of the divorce, but the things that led to that divorce as well can be very painful and damaging to the children. And, you know, I think that gets neglected as well. So, you know, the state of mind of that child after divorce, are there any counselling services that are offered just to make sure, just to be on the safe side, because that way we can get some sort of preconceived ideas in that child's head about, you know, what marriage is. That, you know, they'll have a complete different attitude towards it, to understand that this is not the stereotypical marriage.
Norm. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of children grow up witnessing domestic violence and thinking it's actually normal. Yeah. It's absolutely normal to, you know, to slap your wife, or because, you know, my mum used to get slapped or pushed or shoved, and the psychological effects of that are quite they're quite serious, because then they end up getting married and hitting their wives.
One thing we're discussing on this show, you know, in its nature is this the idea of divorce and in single-parent households. But I suppose one thing we haven't touched on is the idea of maybe a family that isn't divorced, but perhaps the father is not around a lot. Perhaps he is away for whatever reasons, business, or perhaps you know, out too much socializing or whatever. Not trying to generalize. But kind of, do we need to ensure that we have something in place, or we advise even these people say, okay, fine, you're not divorced, but you need to make sure that you don't end up getting divorced first of all, and spend time with your family. And we mentioned during the break that the deen is, you know, the solution to everything, and practicing is the solution to everything. And when you do practice and you follow the deen according to how it should be followed, you realise that everything is so nicely balanced out, you know. And a man is told, you know, we're told kind of how to spend our time, where to spend our time. You know, I remember the narration by Umar ibn Khattab that says a man should be playful with his wife, apart from time when it's time to be serious, then be serious. But we get these little, you know, tips and stuff from the deen we should really take from them, because it really is the solution to everything, right?
It is 100%. You know, we've always mentioned that all a person has to do is use as a model the relationship between the Prophet ﷺ and his wives, and that's the perfect model. That's the thing that really helps them to understand this is what we're supposed to do. This is how we help with marriages, you know, to make sure that they are healthy marriages. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. What people do is they just do their own thing, basically.
I think then the responsibility falls on the shiuch and the imams when they're doing the khutbah, especially in Jamaal, to talk to the young men and the older men and reinforce, you know, what the Prophet ﷺ said, that he is the best amongst the people and he is the best to his wives, to his women, and that is the sunnah. And I think we don't hear enough of that. When we go to, women are constantly told how to be wives and how to be mothers, but I think, you know, the shiuch and the scholars, they need to step up and speak a lot more about this, because the foundations of marriage, the foundations of Islam is the family.
Why is it that it's not spoken about enough?
I don't know. I have no idea, because, like I said, it's the foundation. It's the most important thing. We know that shaitan is happiest when he divorces a couple. We know, everybody knows this is the basics. Everybody who starts practicing knows this hadith. So therefore, I'm kind of perplexed why the shiuch and the scholars don't speak about it enough. They don't address it enough.
I mean, one of the questions that is often asked when someone's going through a marriage arbitration is always asked that same question, which is like, you know, you kind of ask, like, how's the deen in your house? How's your deen? And on many occasions, you'll find that there isn't much of a deen. Like, you know, they don't pray together, they don't do things together, and so it's kind of like the proof is there that this is one of the factors that help causes marriages to, you know, to break down. But even that being said, it is just about the understanding of each person within that marriage, the respect and the love and consideration that they give to each other. And all of these things, you know, they just sort of play a big part in that marriage breaking down.
You know, Allah says in the Quran that He puts rahma, mawadda in the hearts, the love and compassion in the hearts. And I think what's happened in a lot of marriages, the love and the compassion is gone. So, like, your wife, your husband is supposed to be your life partner, you know, libes, he's supposed to be your cover and you're his cover. And so anything that you do in your life should be to make her happy and vice versa. He's your king and you're his queen, and you know, the thought that this is my wife, you know, and it's my wife for life and I love her and I honour her and vice versa, I think that's missing.
I agree completely.
I think it's missing.
No, definitely. And we have a caller on the line. So, Assalamu alaikum, caller. What is your name and what would you like to say to the panellists?
Yeah, welcome to Alhamdulillah. I'm not sure if the panel would agree. I've been listening to your discussion, but I think it's a lot to do with community breakdown, and youngsters are not being socialised in the way they should be, is why they can't form relationships, stable relationships. And also, I believe that, you know, there's widows as well that are single parents and they're not receiving the support that they should be really receiving, because obviously they're going through a grief of losing their partner and then also having to deal with the children as well. So the whole family is affected, and due to community breakdown, and not understanding the situation that people are going through, and people don't really like to ask for help either because they feel that nobody is going to understand them. So I don't know if you want to maybe express your views on that.
No, that's you raised some very good points there. You raised a few points, sister. First of all, we'll take it kind of step by step. You mentioned that the youngsters are kind of don't know how to socialise, I suppose, in the correct way for them to become good community members. How should youngsters be socialising so that they can, or what kind of advice can you give to the youngsters so they can grow up and kind of build, strong, stable families?
I think if within their own families
Sure.
they're able to form good relationships, that could extend to their neighbours, the way the Prophet has explained to us that, the rights of the neighbours, and then the community within the masjids, just building upon relationships. I don't think the youngsters know how to establish stable relationships within their family, like with their brothers, their sisters,
Sure.
their immediate family, their uncles, their aunties, how they should be talking, how they should be communicating. People need to be able to commit. Where the technology, social media has taken over, where children are not talking together, they're talking more through their phones and through their internets, and this is where a lot of problems stems from, because when it comes down to relationship, they can't form it due to them being behind the phones and the computers and Facebook and all the other social media that you know.
No, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I suppose if we're kind of living now in a community more than ever where you can spend a whole day by yourself and still be productive if you've got one of these devices in your hand, we should actually put more effort in now more than ever to encourage socialising and to encourage, akhlaq, like you were mentioning. Sister, just so we can kind of keep it moving swiftly, you also mentioned the support of widows. Sister Mesa, kind of, how can a community kind of take steps towards supporting widows, and is there something that is lacking right now?
Yeah, I definitely think there is. I think maybe what would be a good idea is for an organisation like the Zakat Foundation to set up an organisation where single mums and widows can actually apply for support, whether it's financial or physical help. Like I found that me and a lot of sisters, when we got divorced, one of the biggest issues that we had was to find a handyman when the plumbing went or the electricity went, because you don't want just a random stranger in your home, especially if you're a veiled sister. And these things happen, like in the middle of the night, your electricity would go off. So if there was an organisation that had DBS checked brothers or even non-Muslims that were...
sorry, just wait in, but I just got to mention that you mentioned one of the organisations, but there's loads of organisations, not just the one. But I had
feel free to. I only know that if you want to apply for financial aid, you can apply to Zakat Foundation.
Sure.
If you know of any others, it'd be great to inform them, because there are a lot of sisters and brothers that are in need and don't have anywhere to turn to. They don't know of organisations that they can actually apply to. The only one I know of is Zakat Foundation, but they don't offer support in terms of trying to find handymen or physical support.
Agreed.
That would be a good idea.
Yeah, I don't actually think that there are many others. There are others, though, as you mentioned. But this is a unique idea, in my opinion. And I think that, alhamdulillah, it's really good that you've voiced it today, because there'll be someone out there, if not yourself, who's going to have their pen to paper thinking because it's a fantastic idea.
I
honestly.
hope so, because women and widows, alhamdulillah, we are resilient and we're strong, but, we're not plumbers, we're not electricians, we're not, builders, plasterers, and we're vulnerable. So it would be really good if there was an organisation out there, obviously, that vetted it and made sure that you're a single mum or you're a widow, and then offered that support.
And I suppose that also kind of creates a solution to those people who don't want to necessarily ask for help.
Yeah.
So when an organisation like that exists, they know that there is an organisation for that, and they're not going around trying to constantly feel like they're bugging people. And I think also vice versa. You're right. In my family, my uncle recently became is a man still a widow, right? There's not like a
widower.
So my uncle became a widower as of last year, and so he spent the last 25 years in this amazing, beautiful marriage, and they've raised, alhamdulillah, 3 beautiful children, and she was his life, and she kind of she passed away kind of surprisingly, and he also is left to. They had a very a beautiful relationship where they had their individual roles and they liked their roles and they were very good at what they did and they had an agreement, and so then he's now had to adopt her roles, and I can only imagine that there's perhaps a lack of support there as well for him to think, I don't know, kind of the things that she was doing, how I even do that. You know, even to the smallest thing, like the youngest child, for example, she would prepare all of his food for him for the day, for the school. She had have a school timetable, and so yeah, something does need to be in place where for widows and widowers there's something or someone that they can turn to without having to feel like they're just asking people for help.
Yeah,
Definitely, 100%. Inshallah, if there's anybody out there, you know, do that for sabilillah, because also there's a lot of brothers that want to give time. You know, plumbers, you know, whatever occupation he has, there's a lot of brothers that don't mind, you know, giving 2 or 3 hours a week, and they can rotate to do this for sabilillah.
Perfect. Yeah, fantastic idea.
Jamaal, before we finish up the show, it would be lovely to get some kind of conclusions and I suppose some suggested solutions, just like we were kind of talking about now, ways in which the community can continue to help, and I suppose how we can move forward. And now, you know, divorces are always going to happen, and we're not saying that they can't or shouldn't in situations, but how can we deal with them better? So just kind of final thoughts and final conclusions, and we'll go over to Sister as well.
I think the first thing is regarding marriage is that the Sunnah, although the Sunnah is perfect, but it still needs to be applied in the right place. So here in the UK, the Sunnah of meeting someone and marrying them within a couple of days of knowing them perhaps is not the best idea. It's a better idea to spend time for a sister to find out, is this person really everything that he said that he is, and vice versa. So there should be a period of time where they're getting to know each other. And then that could mitigate the whole thing about the whole taking the course. Then, inshallah, just have patience, sabr with each other, and communication, which is very, very important. Communication from the beginning of the marriage is one of those things that's going to help the marriage to last. So holding something in your heart about something that your husband or your wife does is not really a good idea in the beginning, because then it becomes harder to say something and then it turns into resentment. So.
And Sister Mesa, you know, some final thoughts. What do you want the viewers to take away from you from this show?
I think I would advise brothers and sisters to get involved in khair and to, you know, help try to advise brothers and sisters to stay together, to have sabr before they divorce. And if they do end up divorces, also try to get them back together, try to arbitrate, you know, if they end up getting divorced and they don't get back together, try and help with the children. Ask sisters if she's okay, offer her support, offer her maybe even money, because sometimes, like in a lot of sisters' cases, where the husband was the provider and he's left, she now has to go on benefit, and it takes 6 weeks, for example, to go on benefit. So you can, sister can find herself hungry, yeah, with nothing, with no one to turn to, and especially if she's never been on benefit before, she doesn't know where she's going, what she's doing. So offer support. I think the community needs to get together more, rebuke the brothers, speak to them, have your, you know, give them nasiha. Nasiha is part of the deen. And lastly, I think we should try to aim to have a community centre where there will be where a person can come, and the children can have counselling, the women can have counselling, the brothers can have counselling, you know, if they need help getting benefits. You know, we need to have one place where the community can come to, and even the children, the youth, to learn about the deen, to learn how to get together. And lastly, brothers and sisters need to open up their homes to their teenagers. Teenagers mostly want to be together. So, you know, let your daughters bring their friends over, buy them pizzas, let them watch the TV, let them have a nice evening. Same with the boys. If you give them the PS3, give them pizzas, let them be in their rooms together. Alhamdulillah, obviously watch them. There's no drugs, there's no music and whatnot. Most children just want to be together. Yeah, and they won't be in the streets. So
agreed.
Yeah.
Jazakallah khair to our panellists today for a very insightful discussion. Brothers and sisters, this has been Talk to Me on Eman Channel. We are here every Wednesday, so we will see you at 9 p.m. Every Wednesday. Jamaal, you'll be here sometimes, and sometimes it'll be me. We'll be switching shifts, and every now and again we'll find an episode where we're together. So, you know, just we've got a few seconds left before we end the show, and I'd love to get some thoughts from you.
Yeah.
Jamaal.
Again, it's just all about that.
I have no notes left, so I just need your thoughts.
No, look, we're talking about divorce, right? We spoke about in the past about things like domestic violence, right? There are times when, in my opinion, a divorce is necessary. I don't think someone should be locked into a marriage when there's oppression and hate and hurt taking place. Outside of that, then we should do everything that we can within our power to make sure that those marriages are solid. And that's why there are many people out there who do counselling and stuff like that. But brothers need to be more considerate, sisters need to be more considerate, and then when you come together, inshallah, just do your best just to really hold it together. Don't always see marriage and divorce as an easy way out. It's not an easy way out, because if you failed in one marriage, you have to go to the next one and try to make it work. And if it's a failing within yourself, then it's going to be a continuation moving onwards.
Jazakallah khair, Jamaal, for running that up for us. Brothers and sisters, we will see you next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.